How many of you believe, because you have been taught, that major hindrance to hearing the voice of God is sin? That sin is number one hindrance that hinders people from hearing God's voice. How many of you have been taught that, and how many of you actually believe that? That sin and rebellion hinder people from hearing God's voice. Hallelujah. You know, a lot of books that were written on how to hear the voice of God, the preachers will start by telling you the possibility of you hearing God's voice. And they always end with, now let me tell you things that can hinder you from hearing God's voice. And they will now name sin, rebellion, unforgiveness, all those things. They will name all of them. So, you know what they have just done? Your hope that they have raised from chapter 1, they just crushed it in the last chapter of the book. Because now, your focus will not be on hearing the voice of God again. But your focus will be on, you will now be focusing on the hindrances. Now, you will now be examining yourself. All these hindrances they mentioned, let me see the one in my life. So, and devil will show you plenty of those things. If they mention sin, it will show you so many sins. If they mention rebellion, it will show you that you are rebellious, unbelief, all those things that they mentioned that all those things that they mentioned that and said that hinder people from hearing God's voice. Your focus will now be scrutinizing yourself. You will now be examining yourself whether those hindrances are in your life or not. And devil will keep you busy, pointing them to you. And the moment you see them in your life, you now say, that means I can't hear God's voice until I deal with these things. But do you know that that's a lie from the pit of hell? Let me just destroy that nonsense once and for all. I'm not even going to go to the New Testament because you say it's because Jesus has paid the price, so people have been justified. That's why they can. I will go to the Old Testament. Now they've taught you that sin and rebellion hinder people from hearing God's voice. Now let me ask you another question. Immediately after Adam and Eve sinned and rebelled against God, who spoke to them first? Hallelujah. Now, they told you that sin and rebellion are major hindrances. They are major hindrances to hearing God's voice accurately. That's the lie you have been sold, and you have bought it for years. But they failed to point out to you that even in Genesis chapter 3, immediately after Adam and Eve sinned and rebelled, they heard God's voice loud and clear. So that has already rubbished that teaching. So sin and rebellion do not hinder people from hearing God's voice. Otherwise, Adam and Eve wouldn't have heard him after they sinned and rebelled. Second example in Genesis chapter 4. Cain killed his brother Abel. Cain just committed murder. He just committed murder. Whose voice did he hear after he killed Abel, his brother? Cain just killed his brother. He just committed murder. And God, the next voice he had was God asking him, Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he was communing with God. He was talking back. He said, am I my brother's keeper? I don't know where he is. And God said, you have killed your brother. His blood is crying. He was communing with God. Now, you see, I said something that your understanding set the boundaries for your experience. It creates the boundary. So you can hardly experience, you can hardly have experience above the level of your understanding. That's why people say, with all your getting, get understanding. Now, Cain committed murder. He killed his brother. Yet, he heard God loud and clear. He heard God loud and clear. But you've not killed anybody. They have already taught you that you cannot hear God. You've not killed anybody, but you have already concluded you cannot hear God. Let me point out another thing before we begin to pray now. I need to lay this foundation because the problem is not with God. The problem is with the believers due to errors that they have believed. Those errors have become stronghold in their minds. And that's what has been hindering them from manifesting. Now, do you know that when Adam and Eve sinned, when they rebelled, and they were hearing God's voice, God talking to them, God was not talking to them because they have prayed and fasted. Now you've not rebelled, but you still have to go and pray and fast. You still have to go and fast before you could hear God. But this one rebelled and they did not fast and they heard him. Am I saying you should not be fasting? No. But I'm just telling you that it is religious error that has put stumbling blocks between people and God and make receiving very hard.